I found out someone had been watching me through my smart TV for 8 months. The evidence was in the viewing history. My name is Karen. I am 37 years old. I live in Denver, Colorado. And 14 months ago I discovered that my smart television had been accessed remotely by someone who was not me and had been used to observe my living room through the TV's built-in camera for approximately 8 months. I want to tell you how I found out because the finding out is as disturbing as the fact itself. I had been having a feeling for several months that something was slightly wrong in my apartment. Not dramatically wrong, not the specific wrongness of obvious intrusion, but the low-level persistent wrongness of someone who has learned to pay attention to their environment and is noticing something that their conscious mind has not yet identified. I mentioned this feeling to a colleague who worked in cybersecurity. His name is Thomas, and he asked me 2 questions. He asked if I had a smart TV, and he asked when I had last checked its network activity. I had never checked its network activity. Thomas came to my apartment on a Saturday and spent 4 hours going through my home network with tools I did not have and knowledge I did not possess. What he found in my smart TV's logs was a remote access pattern that had begun approximately 8 months earlier. Regular connections from an external IP address that were not associated with the TV manufacturer's servers, and that had durations suggesting active use rather than background updates. The TV had a camera. The camera had been enabled. Thomas traced the IP address through 3 layers before it terminated in a VPN exit node he could not get past. What he could tell me was the rough geographic origin of the access before the VPN. A location that was consistent with my building. I called the police. The investigation took 2 months. What the police found, through building network records and a cooperation from the building's internet service provider that required a court order, was that the access had originated from an apartment 4 floors above mine. The tenant was a man named Gary who was 26 years old, and who had apparently been interested in my routine, and had used a known vulnerability in my specific TV model to access the camera. Gary was charged with computer fraud and criminal surveillance. His case was resolved through a plea agreement that included a prison sentence. I replaced the TV with a model that does not have a camera. I covered the input ports on every device in my apartment with physical covers that Thomas provided. I run a network security scan every month. I live in a different apartment now. Not because I was required to move, but because I chose to. The new apartment has a door with 2 locks and windows with coverings that cannot be seen through from outside, and a network that Thomas set up, and that he described as appropriately hardened. I think about the 8 months sometimes. I think about sitting in my own living room believing I was alone and not being alone, and I think about Thomas's question, when did you last check its network activity? And I think that the answer to that question is something everyone with a smart device in their home should know. Update: 4 months later. Gary's prison sentence began last month. His attorney had argued for a lighter sentence on the basis of his age and the absence of physical harm. The prosecutor had presented 8 months of unauthorized surveillance as evidence that the absence of physical harm did not constitute the absence of serious harm. The judge agreed. I was not present at the sentencing. I submitted a written victim impact statement that described 8 months of my private life being observed without my knowledge, and what that had cost me in terms of the specific safety I had believed I had in my own home. The statement was read into the record. I do not know if Gary heard it. I wrote it for the record and for myself, and for the specific importance of naming what had been done accurately. Thomas called me after the sentencing to tell me the outcome. I thanked him for the Saturday he had spent on my network. He said he was glad he had asked the right questions. I said I was glad he had too. I check my network activity every month now. Last month everything was exactly what it was supposed to be. The month before that. I am building a record of months in which everything is exactly what it is supposed to be, and I intend to keep building it. My daughter started drawing the same face every day for 3 months. We found out who it was. My name is Rebecca. I am 34 years old. I live in Nashville, Tennessee, and 16 months ago my 6-year-old daughter began drawing the same face every day. Not a variation on a face. The same specific face, same hair, same expression, same details, reproduced with the consistency of a child who is drawing from memory rather than imagination. My daughter's name is Lily. She had always been a child who drew. It was her primary mode of processing and expressing, and I had a drawer full of her drawings going back to when she was 3. The face began appearing in November. Every day, sometimes multiple times a day, always the same. An adult face, female, with specific features I did not recognize. I asked Lily who the person was. She said it was the woman who watched her at school. I contacted her school the following morning and described the drawing to her teacher. Her teacher said she did not recognize the description and that no adult matching it worked at the school. I went to the school in person and met with the principal. I brought 3 of the drawings. The principal looked at them and said she did not recognize the face and that she would have every staff member reviewed against the description. The staff review found no match. I showed the drawings to Lily again and asked her to tell me more about where she had seen the woman. Lily said the woman watched her through the window of her classroom. I went back to the school with this information. The principal reviewed the security camera footage for the exterior of Lily's classroom building. The footage was reviewed for the previous 3 months, the period during which Lily had been drawing the face. On 11 separate occasions over 3 months, the footage showed a woman standing outside Lily's classroom window for periods ranging from several minutes to over half an hour. The woman was not a parent of any student at the school. She was not associated with the school in any capacity. The police were called. The woman was identified through the security footage and through a tip from a neighboring business that had seen her regularly in the area. Her name was Carol and she was 44 years old, and she had a history of behavior that had concerned authorities in a previous city and that had not followed her to Nashville through any formal notification system. Carol was charged with criminal trespassing and stalking. A restraining order was issued. The school enhanced its exterior security. Lily continued drawing for 2 weeks after Carol was identified, and then stopped. The last drawing she made of that face she brought to me and said she did not need to draw it anymore. I asked her why not. She said because you know about her now. I have thought about that answer many times since. Lily had been drawing the same face every day for 3 months because she had been trying to tell me something she did not have the words for. She had been trying to tell me in the only language reliably available to a 6-year-old who is processing something that frightens her. I received the message. It took 3 months and a security camera review, but I received it. Update 4 months later. Lily does not draw the face anymore. She draws other things. Our house, our cat, people she loves with the specific inaccurate proportions of a 7-year-old's loving attention. She drew me last month with very large eyes and very small hands, and showed it to me with the pride of someone who has made something true. I told her it was beautiful, and I meant it in the way you mean things that are more than what they appear to be. I have the 3 months of face drawings in a folder. I kept them because they are evidence, and because they are Lily's version of asking for help, and because some things deserve to be kept even when keeping them is uncomfortable. Carol's restraining order is current. The school's security measures are permanent. Lily as well. I think about the drawer full of her drawings from when she was 3, and I think about what it means that a child's art can be a language, and that learning to read it is one of the more important things a parent can do. I rented a cabin for a solo trip and found evidence someone was living in the basement I did not know existed. My name is James. I am 42 years old. I live in Portland, Oregon, and 2 years ago I rented a remote cabin for a 5-day solo trip and discovered on day 3 that the cabin had a basement I had not known about and that someone had been using it. I want to tell you what the evidence was before I tell you what I did, because the sequence of noticing matters. Day 1 and 2 I had been hiking and reading and cooking and sleeping, and the cabin had been exactly what the listing had described. 1 bedroom, a main living area, a kitchen, a bathroom, a deck with a view of the tree line. On day 3 I noticed that a rug in the kitchen was not lying flat. Not dramatically. It had a slight ridge along one edge that I had attributed to the way it had been placed, and had not examined. On day 3, for a reason I cannot fully account for, I lifted the edge of the rug. Underneath was a hatch. A floor hatch with a recessed handle that had been covered by the rug with a precision that suggested the covering was intentional rather than incidental. I stood in the kitchen of a remote cabin, and I looked at a hatch in the floor that had been deliberately concealed, and I thought about the fact that I was alone, and that I had a cell phone with 1 bar of service, and that I had not told anyone the specific address of where I was staying. I did not open the hatch that day. I went to my car, which was the most secure enclosed space available, and I called the rental platform's emergency line, and I called the county sheriff's non-emergency line, and I described what I had found. The sheriff's office sent a deputy the following morning. The deputy and I opened the hatch together. The basement was approximately the same footprint as the kitchen above it. A small concrete room with a bare bulb, a folding cot, a backpack containing clothing and food, a portable phone charger with cables, and a plastic bin containing personal hygiene items. Someone had been living there. The food in the backpack was not expired. The phone charger was plugged into an outlet in the basement wall. The person was not there when the deputy and I went down but had been there recently. The rental platform was contacted. The cabin's owner, a man who lived in another state and managed the property remotely, claimed he had no knowledge of the basement and no knowledge of anyone using it. The sheriff's investigation identified the person using the basement as a man who had been employed by the property management company the owner had used, and who had lost that employment 6 months earlier, but had retained a key and had apparently been using the cabin's basement as accommodation during rental periods when the cabin was occupied, but the basement was undetected. He was charged with trespassing and criminal entry. I received a full refund from the rental platform, and a formal apology that I received as the inadequate thing it was given that I had spent 2 nights in a cabin with someone in the basement who I had not known was there. I check rental listings for basement or additional space disclosures now before every booking. I lift rugs. I look under things. I have become someone who checks, and I do not think that is a bad thing to have become, even if the becoming of it was not something I would have chosen. Update 3 months later. The rental platform updated their policy for remote property listings to require disclosure of all below-grade spaces, following my complaint and 2 similar complaints from other guests at other properties. I received a notification about the policy update with a note that my complaint had been among those that had contributed to the change. I read the notification once, and then closed it, and went back to what I had been doing because the policy change was the right outcome. And the right outcome does not always feel like something that requires celebration. It feels like something that should have been the policy before. I am glad it is the policy now. I still lift rugs. My husband installed tracking software on my phone. I found out and installed it on his. My name is Michelle. I am 38 years old. I live in Austin, Texas, and 18 months ago I discovered that my husband had installed monitoring software on my phone that had been logging my location, my messages, and my call history for approximately 6 months without my knowledge. I found out through a combination of my phone's battery draining faster than usual, a data usage spike I noticed on our shared phone plan, and a cybersecurity consultant named Thomas. Yes, the same consultant a friend had recommended, who identified the software in 40 minutes on a Saturday afternoon. My husband's name is David. We had been married for 9 years and had 2 children, and I had not known David had concerns about me significant enough to produce the installation of monitoring software on my personal phone. I want to tell you what I did because what I did was not immediately what you might expect. I did not confront David. Not that day. I thought for a week about what the software meant and what I wanted to know before I said anything. Then I installed the same software on David's phone. Same product, same configuration, same coverage, location, messages, call history. I installed it on a Thursday evening while David was in the shower, and I ran it for 3 weeks. What the 3 weeks showed me was not an affair or a secret, or anything that explained why David had felt monitoring me was necessary. What it showed me was a man who went where he said he went and called who he said he called, and whose messages contained nothing I had not known about. What it also showed me was a man who had installed surveillance software on his wife's phone, and who had been receiving 6 months of her location and messages and call history, and who had apparently not found what he was looking for, because whatever concern had produced the installation had not been resolved by 6 months of data. I confronted David at the end of 3 weeks. I showed him what Thomas had found on my phone. He went white. Then I showed him what I had installed on his phone, and 3 weeks of data. He went a different kind of white. We sat at our kitchen table for 4 hours. David told me the installation had come from a period of intense anxiety, not specific suspicion. Generalized anxiety about our marriage that he had not known how to address directly, and that had expressed itself as a surveillance decision he had made and had been ashamed of since he made it. He said he had found nothing in 6 months because there was nothing to find. I told him I knew there was nothing to find. I told him I also knew there was nothing to find on his phone, and that I had installed the software not because I suspected him, but because I had needed him to understand what it felt like to be monitored without consent in an intimate relationship. I do not know if what I did was right. I know it was effective. David is in individual therapy working on the anxiety that produced his decision. We are in couples therapy working on what his decision produced in our marriage. We have both removed the software. We have both agreed to a different approach to trust and to the conversations that trust requires. The marriage is real and ongoing and different from what it was before the Thursday evening I found out. I think different is the accurate word for where we are, and that different can be better than what came before if both people are doing the work of making it so. Update 4 months later. David showed me something last month that his therapist had suggested he share. It was a journal entry he had written the week before he installed the software. An entry about fear, and about what the fear was actually about, and about what he had decided to do with it instead of addressing it directly. The entry was honest in the specific way of something written for yourself rather than for anyone else. And reading it told me things about my husband's interior experience of that period that the surveillance data had never told me and could never have told me. I gave it back to him, and I said I was glad he had shown me. He said his therapist had said the showing was important. I said the therapist was right. We had dinner. It was ordinary. I have been finding that ordinary dinners are the best available evidence that something is being rebuilt, and I have been paying attention to them. Started receiving letters addressed to me at an address I had never lived at. Someone had been living as me for 2 years. My name is Sarah. I am 36 years old. I live in Chicago, Illinois, and 10 months ago I received a forwarded letter from a postal address I had never lived at. A forwarding that the postal service had automatically applied because the name on the letter matched my name in their system, and the previous address had been linked to my current address through a process I did not fully understand until a postal inspector explained it to me. The letter was a utility final notice. The utility was for an apartment in a city I had not lived in. The name on the letter was my full legal name, including my middle name, which I had never used publicly. I called the utility company. They had an account in my name going back 2 years. The account had been opened with my social security number, with my date of birth, with what appeared to be a version of my signature on the original account application. I had not opened this account. I had not lived at this address. I had not given anyone my social security number for this purpose. I called my credit monitoring service. The monitoring service found 3 accounts I had not opened: the utility, a credit card, and a store charge account, all opened in the previous 2 years, all in my full legal name, all using my social security number and date of birth. My credit score had not been significantly affected because the accounts had apparently been kept current until recently, when the utility had fallen behind and produced the final notice that had been forwarded to me. Someone had been living as me for 2 years. Not as a stolen identity used to open accounts and disappear. As a sustained constructed identity that had maintained accounts and built a small parallel financial life using my credentials. I hired an identity theft attorney named Carol and a private investigator named Marcus. Marcus spent 3 weeks on the address. What he found was a woman named Diane who was 41 years old and who had been living at the apartment under my name and who had, by his best reconstruction, obtained my personal information through a data breach at a company I had worked for 4 years earlier that had exposed employees' social security numbers and personal data. Diane had used that breach to construct a life, not a fraudulent credit scheme, a parallel existence. She had rented an apartment, opened utility accounts, obtained a store credit card. She had been, in a specific limited way, living as me for 2 years in a city I had never visited. The legal process involved the Attorney General's Consumer Protection Office, a federal identity theft complaint, and civil action against Diane, and against the company whose data breach had provided her with my information. Diane was charged with identity theft and fraud. The civil action against the company resulted in a settlement that Carol described as appropriate. My credit was corrected. My social security number was flagged for enhanced verification for future account openings. I have credit monitoring on all 3 bureaus set to alert me within hours of any new inquiry or account. I think about Diane sometimes. I think about a woman living in an apartment under my name in a city I have never been to, and what that says about identity, and about how much of it is a collection of numbers and credentials that can be separated from the person they belong to and reassembled elsewhere. I have been thinking about what it means to have a self that can be partially duplicated, and about what parts of it cannot be taken, and about whether those parts are the ones that matter most. I think they are. I think Diane could live at my address and use my social security number, and she could not be me, and the not being me is the thing that could not be stolen. Update: 4 months later. Diane's case concluded last month. She received a sentence that included prison time and restitution, and a requirement to cooperate with the investigation into the data breach company's security practices. The company's settlement funded 18 months of credit monitoring for every former employee whose data had been exposed in the breach, approximately 400 people. Carol sent me the settlement documentation, and I read it carefully, and I thought about 400 people who had their social security numbers in a database that had not been adequately protected, and about how many of them had not known and might still not know. I sent a notification to every former colleague I could reach telling them about the breach and the monitoring service. 3 of them called me back to say they had found accounts they had not opened. 3 people who had been living with a theft they had not known about until I told them. I think about the forwarded letter sometimes. I think about a utility final notice arriving at my address, and about what would have happened if it had not been forwarded. Some things find you by accident, and the accident